Camp Tontozona is here for the Sun Devils, and we're going to discuss why we need to see a brotherhood formed as the most important objective by the end of camp.
You are Locked On Sun Devils, your daily podcast on the Arizona State Sun Devils. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Welcome back to the Locked On Sun Devils podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. My name is Richie Bradshaw, and I will be your guide for everything Arizona State Sun Devils. Shout out to my everydayers who are here every day, and thanks for making us your first listen of the day. Don't forget to hit like, hit subscribe, and turn on notifications wherever you're getting your shows. Stay in touch by following me on Twitter at RichieBrads36, the podcast at LO_Sun Devils. If you have not hit subscribe on YouTube yet, do me a favor, hit that subscribe button. Trying to get to 1,000 subscribers before the season starts. We are at 853. Believe it or not, we've added like 100 followers over the last month. So I know we can get there. We are making some serious strides as a channel. And once we do get there, we'll find a way to celebrate together. Today's episode is brought to you by Game Time. Download the Game Time app, create an account, and use code LOCKEDONCollege for $20 off your first purchase. Terms apply. Ladies and gentlemen, welcome back. And today we are going to be taking a look at Camp Tontozona for the Sun Devils. And they will be up there for the remainder of the week. There will be a scrimmage that is open to the public on Saturday. So if you're looking to get out of the heat, go check out some Sun Devils football. Definitely make the trip out to Tontozona and enjoy some football. It's a great experience for these kids. It's a great experience for the fans to build that rapport with each other, for these players to have that opportunity to get to know each other on a deeper level. That's the freshmen, that's the transfers. It's even the guys that are returning. It's an opportunity to build that kinship. And that's where we're going to start our conversation. When we take a look at the things that we want to see by the end of Camp Tontozona, there's three things that I'll be looking for. The biggest of all of them will be that brotherhood. Now, there's the biggest question that I already posed. How are they going to respond to building relationships with each other? This was something that Herm Edwards had not done a good job with. He didn't do Camp Tontozona or anything like that. Kenny Dillingham comes, and in his first year, he says, yeah, we're going back up. We are going to make this part of the yearly tradition for us. We're going to implement it as a part of the culture that we're building. They go up there. The guys have a blast. You hear some great stories from the guys who spend time around a campfire and hang out playing. I think they have a ping pong table or something like that. It might be like an air hockey table. And they just are guys being guys. They don't have their phones with them. That is such a huge part of society these days, as we all know, is having your cell phone with you is just a thing. You don't really go anywhere without it. Like, there's times where you may not have it on you, but a lot of people have their phones with them, and it's all the social media. It's having Twitter. It's having TikTok. It's being able to play those mobile games, whatever you might be playing. There's all sorts of distractions that we have on the phones that you may not be able to build that relationship the way that you can at Tontozona, because you don't have that. You're, as Kenny Dillingham says it, you're forced to get to know the other players because you don't have anything to kind of supplant your attention. You are spending a lot of time with these guys. And it's not just about hanging out and broing it out. It's also a part of really getting to know each other on a deeper level, building an emotional relationship with these guys, having them become your brothers, not just on the field, but off the field, building lifelong relationships. It's easily the most important part of what they try to do at Camp Tontozona. You also are looking for guys to start establishing themselves as leaders. Last year, the two biggest names that I heard from Camp Tontozona were Jalen Conyers and Jordan Clark. Well, unfortunately, both of them entered the transfer portal this offseason. Neither of them are with the team. ASU also lost some other veterans on the team. Elijah Badger is gone. You saw, oh my goodness, who am I trying to think of? Elijah Badger transferred. There's another big one. I can't remember. Oh, Trey Brown. Trey Brown is no longer with the team. He ran out of eligibility. BJ Green is gone. There's a lot of replacing that the Sun Devils are having to do on this team. So, who's going to step up? Who's going to be some of the big leaders this year? We're going to be looking at some of the longtime players. I know the first person who comes to mind for me is Keyshawn Elliott, someone that I truly believe in my heart of hearts is going to end up being your new Trey Brown in more ways than one. First of all, he's probably going to be your starting middle linebacker or one of the two linebackers. He's someone that has production at a high level. He's a very good football player. He checks off that box. He also has a lot of playing experience. He was a 3-year player at New Mexico State before he moved over to Arizona State. He's got a rapport with his previous Aggies. He's coming to the Sun Devils now. It's not going to be the easiest thing in the world to instantly place yourself into a brand new locker room and become a leader, but I do think that he has the potential to find that role for himself. Keyshawn Elliott, one of the guys I'm going to be paying the most attention to. You also have some other guys. Another name who comes to mind for me, believe it or not, is Cole Martin, who is only going into his second year. There's something about the way he carries himself that makes me think he's going to end up being one of those guys that we talk a lot about by the end of the year as one of the stalwart leaders on the team. I don't know what it is. It's just a gut feeling. You could see some other guys as well who we're maybe not talking enough about. Cameron Scadaboo, I feel like, is an obvious name, but also maybe a sleeper name. We don't really talk about him too much as like a big time vocal leader per se. You could be looking at Jordan Tyson or Troy O'Mary. Heck, you could have, oh my goodness. Of course I can't remember his name. Jeff Sims. How do I forget the name Jeff Sims? Jeff Sims could end up being one of those leaders for you as someone who's played 5 years of college football. There's plenty of guys who could turn into leaders on this team, and it'll be one of the most telling storylines for this program walking away from Camp Tontozona. And the bottom line is you're kind of looking for how this team ends up walking away from camp. We'll talk about that a little bit more towards the end of the show. But how are they going to respond to a week together? Are we going to see stronger relationships getting built? Are we going to see relationships get strained? You really hope that's not the case, but it's always within the possibilities. It's always within the realm that some guys may not end up as close as we want them to. We hope it's not the case, but it very well could be. From the experience we had last year, it was very positive all the way around. I don't think that there was any negatives. So you're hoping that ends up being the same case again this year. You walk away from it with guys that are really bought into the program and with each other. It's going to be pivotal. But again, like I said, we'll take a closer look at that towards the end of the podcast when we talk about getting a heat check on this team. Next thing I want to talk about is some depth that I want to see figured out. There's a handful of positions that by the end of Camp Tontozona, I want to have a little more clarity with, whether it's knowing who the starters are or having a good idea who they could be. We're going to talk about those positions in just a moment. This is the Locked On Sun Devils podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. Game Time is an authorized ticket marketplace for Major League Baseball and makes getting tickets faster and easier. Prices on the Game Time app actually go down the closer it gets to first pitch, with killer last-minute deals, all-in prices, views from your seat, and their lowest price guarantee. Game Time takes the guesswork out of buying Major League Baseball tickets. You can take a look at the store and get up to 60% off for buying last minute tickets, not just for sports, but concerts, comedy, theater, and more. You can try out the flash deals that are exclusive in app on select seats ahead of the game or event. You can try zone deals where you choose the section and Game Time will choose the seats. Their all-in pricing toggle feature will show you the total upfront so there's no surprise fees at checkout. They also have a lowest price guarantee, which means that Game Time will credit you 110% of the difference if you find tickets in the same section and row for less. Speaking of which, get a panoramic view from your seat in the app before you buy. And of course, your purchase is covered with the most flexible customer service policy in the ticketing industry. Take the guesswork out of buying MLB tickets with Game Time. Download the Game Time app and create an account and use code LOCKEDONCollege for $20 off your first purchase. Terms apply. Again, create an account, redeem code LOCKEDONCOLLEGE for $20 off. Download Game Time today. Last minute tickets, lowest price, guaranteed. Thanks for making Locked On Sun Devils your first listen of the day. And for your second listen of the day, check out Locked On College Football with good friend of the podcast, Spencer McLaughlin, as he gets you ready for an exciting season on the gridiron. And we have discussions about the upcoming season, the ever-changing landscape of college athletics, including conference realignment, the transfer portal, NIL, new college football, expanded playoff, and more. Locked On College Football is available on YouTube and wherever you get your podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. Back into our conversation now and taking a look at the positions that I would like to have a little bit of clarity with. Now, I don't necessarily need to have the depth chart spelled out for me. I don't need first team, second team, third team, but I do want to have a really good idea of where we stand at these specific positions. I've got 5 positions listed here that I would like to have a really good idea of who's starting and who's not. The first position is wide receiver. Now, it feels like we know who the top 2 guys are between Troy O'Mary and Jordan Tyson. What's after them? One of the guys who we have not talked about on the podcast, and that's on me, is Malik McLean, who is transferring in from Penn State. He is someone who apparently has really looked good in practices. He had a good practice today on Wednesday. Can he continue to string those together? He's a talented player. He's someone that Arizona State has a keen interest in. I haven't seen any of him. I'll let you know when I get a chance to witness him in person. But I know that this is someone that could very well sneak into the starting lineup. But you also have guys like Melkon Stovall, who I've been very high on before, Jake Smith, who I know a lot of people are excited for because he looked good in camp last year, and Xavier Guillory, who is another savvy veteran for the team. You've got some young kids like Corbin Hendricks and Zachariah Sample and Caleb Black. There's a lot of guys on this team who could end up being standouts. Now it's a matter of who's where. Again, we have an idea who number 1 and number 2 are, interchangeable between O'Mary and Tyson. But who's 3? Is it McLean? Is it Stovall? Is it Jake Smith? That's what we would like to have a more concrete answer with. We would like to see what that starting lineup looks like. And if I had to make a prediction off the top of my head, I would say that Stovall is your number 3 receiver, and he would be playing the slot while you have Tyson and O'Mary on the boundary. Next position, offensive tackle. Now, offensive tackle is a really interesting spot this year. I thought it would be pretty set in stone that you would have Josh Atkins at left tackle and Emmett Bully at right tackle. And that's not been the case. It sounds like Maxi Onaker is your starting right tackle. It sounds like that's not quite a certainty, but he's been getting the most reps there with the starting first team, and he's the guy who has looked the best playing at that position. So as of now, Maxi Onaker basically it's his job to lose. And I'm going to continue being under that assumption until I am proven wrong. Left tackle, where I thought Josh Atkins was going to be the plug and play, that's not been the case. There has been a very good competition there. In fact, Emmett Boley, who I thought would be your starting right tackle, is getting a lot of work with the starting team for the left tackle spot. Now, he's coming off a serious injury, but it was a freak injury. It wasn't something that has been a lingering thing throughout his career. It was a freak broken ankle, I think. It might have been his fibula, but you weren't expecting that to happen. And as long as he's got the confidence back, he was playing at a high level. Like, this is a good football player. He's someone that you plug into your lineup and you kind of set it and forget it with him. Moving to left tackle is going to be a really interesting change for him because he had played on the right side for his first 2 years in Tempe. How's he going to respond to moving to the left side? Well, so far, he seems to be doing a pretty good job. Is that going to be the case after we leave Tontozona? Are we going to kind of have that clarity of Bully at left tackle and Ioniker at right tackle? I feel like that's a really strong possibility right now. Next spot, defensive tackle. Look, we know CJ Fight is one of the starting guys. That's been no secret from the coaching staff. That's been no secret from a playing standpoint on the field. Who is playing next to him? There's a handful of guys. Jeff Clark has been getting a lot of action with the first team. Jeff Clark, as we've mentioned before on this show, feels like that savvy veteran that ASU has valued over the last few years. 2 years ago, it was Nesta Jade Silvera, graduate transfer from Miami, ends up starting the whole year. Last year, it was Deshaun Mallory, graduate transfer from Michigan, ends up starting the whole year. This year, it's Jeff Clark, graduate transfer from Louisville. Is he a starter for the whole year? That's where it's really interesting. And time is a flat circle, so it feels like this is just history repeating itself. But there's good competition, man. Zach Swanson is someone who's really got my attention as a potential plug-and-play guy there. He is a good football player, and there was hype for him coming out of high school. He was a 4-star recruit. He's not been able to get onto the field a ton to start his career. Is he going to be ready for a more full-time role? That's one of the guys that I think is going to have some of the most attention to is whether or not he's ready for a larger full-time role for the team. You've got some other options as well. You'll be taking a look at not Jamon Tapp. Who is it? I can't think of his name off the top of my head. Kyron Borda is there. JP Deere is there. God, who's a veteran? Blazin Lana Wong is one of the guys as well. There's options for you along the interior, potentially Justin Wadley, maybe, that you could kind of play around with. Do you want a really big guy next to CJ Fight, or do you want kind of a smaller guy? There's options for you to go with. But I would like to know at least a little more concretely who's going to be playing next to Fight. Almost full-time. Feels like it's Clark's job to lose. Next spot is linebacker. I already mentioned it feels like a pretty safe bet that Keyshawn Elliott's going to be one of the starters. Who's starting next to him? Tate Romney was a full-time starter last year, and he was a very good full-time starter for the Sun Devils. Will that be the case again this year? Or will he be usurped by one of the longtime veterans? Zyrus Fiaseu, transferring in from San Diego State, also has a really good opportunity here to claim a starting role next to Keyshawn Elliott. You've got younger guys as well. Jordan Crook is transferring in from Arkansas. There's a little bit of hype behind him. Crew Jackson is going into his second year with the team. Kavion Thunderbird is going into his second year with the team. You've got Miles Amy is there. You've got Caleb McCullough, Martell Hughes, the incoming freshman. There's options here at linebacker for you to play around with. Maybe Keyshawn Elliott isn't even the starter that you walk away with. Maybe it's two of the other guys we mentioned. Maybe it's Martell Hughes and Kavion Thunderbird. Maybe it's Jordan Crook and Cyrus Fiaseu. Maybe it's Crew Jackson and Tate Romney. There's a ton of different possibilities that you could have here. You feel confident that Keyshawn Elliott is one of the two guys. Who's number two? In my opinion, it should be Tate Romney until further notice. If it's not him, you probably go Cyrus Fiaseu as having two veterans at the linebacker spot. The last position that I want to see some clarity with is safety. Similar to linebacker, you should have a plug and play with Shamari Simmons. That's kind of a set it and forget it as well. He was a full-time starter last year. He was a high-level player for you last year. It's his job to lose. Next to him, a lot of talent, man. Xavier Alford, who, friend of the podcast, should be able to be the plug and play, but it's not going to be given to him. You've got Kamari Wilson coming in, a former very highly touted recruit out of high school, a 4-star recruit who played a year with Florida before coming to Arizona State. He could easily be one of the starting safeties. Ghost Rouser, another guy who, transferring in from New Mexico State, has ball production. He might be one of the starting guys. You've got some young guys as well. You've got Montana Warren is coming back from injury. He looked like one of the best defenders on the team during training camp last year. Can he pick up where he left off and leave Tontozona with that momentum he was building up? Last year, unfortunately, he was injured at Camp Tontozona. As long as he's healthy, he is a threat to be a starter for this team. How is this team going to end up shaking out at the safety position? This is one of the biggest competition battles on the team because there is so much depth. And Shamari Simmons isn't necessarily guaranteed a starting role with the team. He could be usurped by Kamari Wilson and Ghost Rouser. You could still have the veterans with Alford and Simmons back there. You could go with a youth movement and have Montana Warren back there. Keontae Bradley and Keith Abney kind of bounce around back and forth between safety and corner. You've got Kyan McDonald is coming in as a true freshman. They like him. There's more than a few guys that they could take a look at and play around with to be starting safeties here. So how that ends up shaking out is going to be a really big storyline here. I don't know if it gets figured out in Camp Tontozona, but again, just like these other 5 positions, I would like to see some more clarity from it. The last thing that we're going to talk about, we need a heat check for this team as we get to the end of Camp Tontozona. We'll talk about that in a moment. This is the Locked On Sun Devils podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. One more time, wherever you get those shows, hit like, hit subscribe, turn on notifications so you get an update whenever we post new content. Shout out to my everydayers who are here every day, and thanks for making us your first listen of the day. If you haven't subscribed on YouTube yet, do me a favor, hit that subscribe button, help us get to 1,000 subscribers before the season starts, and we'll find a way to celebrate together as a channel. Wrapping up the podcast, the last thing that I want to see from this team as we leave Tontozona at the end of the weekend, I need a heat check. It's about that relationship that these guys are building that we've already talked about, but it's also, how do they look? Is this a team that looks far better than they were a year ago? Is this a team that is ready to go from 3 wins to 6 wins? Is this a team that is just making steady progress and maybe you're closer to 4 or 5 wins this year, but you're a more competitive team? We need to have a pretty good feel for this team as they leave Camp Tontozona, because after this weekend, you will have 2 full weeks of practice, that'll just be practice. And then you'll have game week preparation, as on the 31st, you take on Wyoming. So it's going to come up really, really fast. You need to be able to leave camp, and we should be able to get a good read on this team and see if they are ready to be competing at a high level or if they're just taking positive steps forward. I don't think this is a program that's going to look worse than they were last year. I think they're going to be definitively better this year. I've been on record many a times that this is a team that's going bowling this year. I have done a preliminary win-loss record that I feel pretty decent about. We'll go over that closer to the start of the season. So again, if you haven't hit subscribe so you don't miss that episode. This is a team that you need to see is improving from year 1 to year 2. You are hoping that this is a week that you get a really good sense and a really good idea for where they are. You need to be able to walk away from Camp Tontozona with that heat check and say, yeah, compared to last year, this is a group that is definitively better. You need to be able to walk away and say, there's stuff we still got to work on. And that's another thing here is we got to identify what still needs to be a priority. We need to identify, hey, this is a spot that we need to really invest more time in, that we need to get better with. That's also really important, is understanding that, hey, you're going to come away with strengths on this team. You're going to come away, hopefully, with a lot of confidence, but there's still going to be plenty of stuff that you got to work on. You still need to be able to identify, hey, A, B, C, and D, X, Y, and Z need improvement. We need to see A, B, and C player find a way to improve on X, Y, and Z. We need to be able to see the depth chart of safety 1, safety 2, safety 3, of linebacker 1, linebacker 2, of left tackle, right tackle, wide receiver 3, whatever. We need to be able to identify, okay, these are the weaknesses that we see from this position group. This is where we need to get better. That goes for Coach Hines Ward. That goes for Coach Saga Tueli. This goes for Coach Brian Carrington, of the 3 that I just named. But you need to be able to have the coaches identify this is where we need to work the most. That's going to be pivotal as well, is walking away, hopefully more confident with this team, but also understanding that this isn't a perfect team, and this is a team that is still trying to get back to being competitive on a year-to-year basis. You need to identify where you need to improve the most. This is a great opportunity to do a lot of things for your program. Build that kinship, build the relationships first and foremost. You also need to be able to you need to be able to have a good grasp on where you're at. Again, to feed a fed horse, are you ready to compete? Or is this a program that is hopefully a little bit better than they were last year? You're really hoping that this isn't a team that is coasting and a team that is where they were a year ago. Kenny Dillingham has said plenty of times during the offseason, it's about raising the minimum expectation for these guys. So you need to see that they are taking those positive steps forward, that they aren't regressing, that they aren't coasting, that they are getting better. So you need a heat check by the end of camp. You want to see how the relationships are being built with these guys. And hopefully you can start to see a little bit of clarity when it comes to the depth chart. But that's all that I know that I'm paying attention to from Camp Tontozona. What are you guys going to be paying attention to? Let me know in the comments. You can hit me up on Twitter at RichieBrads36, the podcast at LO_Sun Devils. Wherever you're getting your shows, hit like, hit subscribe, turn on notifications so you get an update whenever we post new content. Shout out to my everydayers who are here every day. Thanks for making us your first listen of the day. And again, if you haven't hit subscribe on YouTube yet, do me a favor, hit that subscribe button and help us get to 1,000 followers before the season starts. Guys, again, I appreciate you all for tuning in. You're the best fans in the world. I know that we're going to get to 1,000 before the season starts, and we're going to be in seventh heaven. We're going to be absolutely partying it up. And this is going to be a great season, not just for the Sun Devils, but for the podcast as well. So I appreciate you guys for tuning in. I'll see you next time. Till then, you keep it locked right here on Locked On Sun Devils.